From the field to the film room to the war room, we've got you covered every step of the way as the road to the draft starts right now. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Armchair Scouts. I am your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by my co-host and fellow draft enthusiast Dives. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Be sure to check out his podcast, Party on Broad. Dives, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. You know, we were kind of like a little mid about week 0, but you couldn't really have asked for anything more. You had 2 games that went down to the wire. SMU with a touchdown pass with a minute remaining in the fourth quarter. Georgia Tech rising to the occasion. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And this weekend should be a lot more fun, a lot more games going on. We actually had choices for our game of the week, which we'll get to a little later. But I'm also joined by Dives co-host on Party on Broad. It's Ryan. Give him a follow on Twitter at Philly Sports PSA. Ryan, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. Ready to talk a whole slew of week 1 games here. Finally, I'm going to be using the quad box on YouTube TV.
All right. And last but not least, I'm joined by my co-host on Chalk Talk, Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Be sure you check out his Tough Cover radio show every Saturday. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I cannot tell you how excited I am for there to be a million college football games all happening on the same time, and I'll have 6 bets on the 12 o'clock slate this week. It'll be insane. I absolutely cannot wait.
All right. Well, let's get into it. For those of you, maybe you missed last week's episode, you're a little unfamiliar with the format of the show. You might ask, why a college football podcast on an Eagles feed? Well, it's because we love college football and we love the draft and we want to start getting those names out to you guys. And so each week each of us will give you an Eagles prospect profile, a guy that we think the Eagles might be interested in come draft night. Just as you're watching games, you can keep an eye out for those guys, get to know some of the names and faces. I guess not so much the faces, they wear helmets, but I digress. Then we will do a player of the week prediction. Think fantasy football, except we only get to make 1 pick, and we'll revisit our results from that throughout the season, and then we will preview our game of the week. If you can only watch 1 game, we're going to recommend the game that should be, and we'll break it down for you. So we're going to lead it off as we always do with our Eagles prospect profile. So let's get into it. All right, Mark. I made you wait till last week. I'm going to throw it to you first tonight. Who is the target that you're keeping an eye on for the Eagles this weekend?
I'm starting the year with a little bit of like a handicap for myself. I know the Notre Dame players much better than I know these other players early on in the season for obvious reasons as a Notre Dame fan. But I'm going to go with, in my opinion, the best player on Notre Dame's defense and potentially maybe the best player on the roster, in Xavier Watts, their safety from last year. He had an incredible 2023. He had 7 interceptions, 4 passes defense, 1 fumble recovered. He was absolutely the best player on their roster last season on a 9-3 team, and he seemed to do it in the clutchest of moments and in the big games, and kind of gave Caleb Williams a tougher time than anybody else we saw the entire season. But Xavier Watts, he only allowed a 37.8 passer rating, which was the 8th best mark by a defensive back last season. He needs to improve a little bit in terms of the run game as a tackler. He missed 18% of his tackle attempts and didn't have a great run defense grade, but I think he's just such a high-level playmaker that's going to play at the next level. So I think he's going to have another great year. I imagine that quarterbacks probably will throw a little bit away from him with those 7 picks from last year, so I don't think he'll be repeating that. But a fun thing about Xavier Watts is he actually won last year the Bronco Nagurski Award that's handed out to the best defensive player in college football every year. Normally, I don't pay a lot of attention to college football awards, but if you look at the recent winners of the Nagurski Award, It's Will Anderson twice, Chase Young, Josh Allen, Bradley Chubb, and Jonathan Allen. All those guys turned out pretty well, pretty good in the NFL. So pretty crazy that he was, the best player in the country, according to them on defense. And now he's back for another year. So he's only being projected as a second rounder. And we know how safeties seem to get pushed down these days in the draft. The positional value, I think, is out of whack. I think it's an incredibly important position, but the NFL disagrees. So probably won't be a first round pick. I think he is an absolute home run on day 2.
Yeah, Vic Fangio does not disagree. Vic Fangio thinks safety is highly important, so maybe we'll see that trend start to change a little bit with the Eagles. So, Dibes, I'll kick it over to you next, just for continuity's sake, because your guy is going to be playing against Mark's guy. So why don't you talk to me about your Eagles prospect profile?
Yeah, I love the pick of Xavier Watts. Every single week I did college football winners of the week, and I think Xavier Watts won 5 of them. He was one of the top guys. He just was a major ball hawk, major playmaker for Notre Dame. I'm really excited about this game against Texas A&M, and I'm going to go with a guy from Texas A&M who's got first-round buzz written all over him. He's an edge rusher, Nick Scorton, 6'4", 280 pounds. He, like James Pierce Jr., who is arguably edge 1, depending on who you talk to, Abdul Carter's right up there in 2025. Nick Scorton had a truly breakout sophomore campaign. His 21.3 pass rush win rate last year ranked 9th among edge defenders. He had 15 tackles for loss. That ranked 4th. And he had a 91 pass rushing grade per PFF last year, which trailed only Liatu Latu and James Pierce Jr. He had 10 sacks. That's the most by a Purdue player since Ryan Kerrigan in 2010, who had 12 and a half. And this is a guy who transferred to Texas A&M this past January. He's playing for a new school. And as a prospect, he's got excellent movement ability for a guy at his size. He's an elite force with high upside. He's already got an elite level spin move, Mark. You're going to be seeing that this weekend. He's got already a pro-ready frame. He's got great length. And on top of all that, the cherry on the cake is that he doesn't turn 20 until this month. So I think the biggest matchup to watch between the Aggies and the Fighting Irish will be, will be the defensive line versus the Notre Dame offensive line. The defensive line for the Aggies is by far their strength, at least it is on paper. And on the other side, Notre Dame, I think, trots out an offensive line that trying to replace 2 tackles from a year ago, a pair of guys who had their names called out in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft in 2024. So look for Nick Scorton to have a huge day against the Fighting Irish. I think he's got mid-first-round pickish upside. Check him out.
Yeah, we've got Eagles X's and O's chiming in on YouTube, said he watched Edger and Cooper tape last offseason, and that guy really popped.
He played for Purdue. He didn't play for Texas A&M much.
Okay. All right. Let's keep it rolling here. Ryan, I'll throw it over to you. I'll save my guy for last. Who do you have for your Eagles prospect?
All right. I'm going shocker here, linebacker. I'm going to go with a Georgia linebacker. We all love our Georgia players here for the Eagles, and that's Jalen Walker. This is a guy who, over the past 2 years, has absolutely been an impactful player for that Georgia defense. Last year, accumulating 20 tackles, 5 sacks, and really kind of broke out into the national spotlight, recording 2 sacks and 5 quarterback hurries against Alabama in the SEC championship. This is a guy that is just an athletic freak. He's quick. He runs a 4.5 40. And he can play inside, he can play outside linebacker, kind of being able to be a valuable piece depending on what scheme he ends up playing for in the NFL. He's a really high motor kind of guy, and he's kind of a name, I guess, that maybe a lot of players or a lot of people are not that familiar with. But this is a guy that I project to kind of be a day 2 linebacker. Look for him to kind of keep shooting up the boards as the season rolls on. As you know, he's a pretty sound player, strong tackler, high IQ, and he just absolutely flies sideline to sideline. So Jalen Walker is definitely a guy that as we know, the Eagles don't always like to spend a lot of high capital on in the draft, but again, perhaps a day 2 pick for Walker might be the way to go here, and adding another Bulldog to the Eagles' defensive side of the ball.
All right. Well, we're going to keep it easy for you guys because Mark and Dibes went opposite. Ryan and I are going opposite too. So you only got to watch 2 games this weekend to capture all of our prospects.
Nice.
My guy is offensive tackle Blake Miller from Clemson. Blake Miller was a 4-star recruit who started all 14 games as a true freshman in 2022 for Clemson. He was only the 3rd true freshman to start a season opener at offensive tackle for Clemson since World War II. He was a freshman All-American in 2022. In 2023, he was 3rd team All-ACC. He's 6'6", 310 pounds. Obviously, all that's unofficial. It's coming off of team depth charts, but he's played just shy of 2,000 snaps at right tackle in the last 2 seasons. And if we know a team that likes to obsess about Lane Johnson replacement, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. On 1,074 pass blocking snaps in the last 2 years, he's allowed only 5 sacks, which is a 0.4% sack rate, and 22 pressures, which is a 2% pressure rate. Last season, he was the 27th highest graded run blocking offensive tackle per PFF. I think he's really durable. He has not really missed time in 2 seasons, which is always a big plus. I think he's got good lateral agility. He's able to gain depth to get out to wider alignments from pass rushers, especially speed rushers. He can also be used as a puller or a lead blocker on screens, puller in the run game. Penalties were an issue for him as a freshman. He had 10, but he reduced that to 6 last year, so that's a positive trend that will hopefully continue. I will say he's not the strongest in the running game. Like he identifies and latches onto the right target and sustains those blocks, but he doesn't really generate displacement unless he's on the move. So they will get him on the move a lot of times, but that's an area of growth, as well as like his technique, his hand placement, his footwork. They both have room for growth, but I mean, he's a true junior this year. He could come out into the draft. He could also play another season after this year. You don't know, but right now he's kind of projected as like a late day 2 guy, maybe a good fit for a zone blocking scheme. You could use him in a gap scheme too, kind of as that puller, but I think he could be a guy that could interest the Eagles as a developmental piece. We were kind of surprised they didn't take a tackle this year. Maybe next year, Blake Miller could be their guy. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. Maybe he will lock down Jalen Walker on a blitz rep at some point, and I can shoot Ryan a text about it.
Yeah, the reps between him and Michael Williams, who projects to also be a 1st-round pick as an edge rusher, should be really fun to watch.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
sunburnt in that picture, by the way, that you guys used. Extremely sunburnt.
He's going to be burnt a little bit more come Saturday.
Oh, man. That's going in the promo clip. So, we got a comment here on YouTube. Rufus Rogers chiming in. Draft talk. It's been too long. It has. We're so back, and we're going to be doing this each and every week through the season, so that'll be a lot of fun. So those are our Eagles targets to keep an eye on. Now let's turn the page. Let's go to our Player of the Week predictions. All right, Player of the Week predictions. We're going to recap our picks from last week, although we agreed that we weren't going to score last week since there were so few picks. But I had Preston Stone, the quarterback from SMU. He threw for 251 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, and he added 35 rushing yards. Mark had DJU, the quarterback from Florida State, who really stunk. Threw for 193 yards, rushed for 7 yards. There was a lot of memes about DJU going around on the internet now. But Ryan went with Haynes King, the quarterback for Georgia Tech. He completed 11 passes for 146 yards. He also rushed for 54 yards. And then Dives went with running back Lawrence Tuafili from Florida State, who had 8 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown. He had 25 receiving yards.
He had the bulk of his yards on the first drive, and then I was like all hyped up that I was like, this is over. It's over, like Vince Carter-esque. No, he didn't do anything after that.
Yeah, I thought I was in trouble too because Preston Stone got benched after the second drive, but apparently they're just rocking like a 2 QB system. So, anyways, we didn't score those. If we did, I would have won. But in future weeks, we will score those. The winner will get 3 points, second place 2, third place 1, and last place 0. And we'll keep a running total and update you guys on that throughout the season. So let's dive into it here. Let's go Ryan first. Who is your player of the week prediction?
So only in a dream scenario could I piss off 2 of you with one selection. And sure enough, the gods have given this gift to me. And that is Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma, pissing off Shane, of course, who is an Oklahoma fan. And they're going against Temple, who Dives obviously loves. Listen, this game is going to be an absolute bloodbath. Oklahoma is going to roll over those cherry and white owls. Jackson Arnold coming in to Oklahoma really wants to kind of, again, set the tone for his season here and be able to just put up some gaudy numbers on a pretty lifeless Temple Owl defense here. So I don't expect him to. I mean, honestly, the only thing that might hurt me is him getting pulled from the game because the game is so out of reach. Jackson Arnold again, a great quarterback for Oklahoma. Can run the ball, can throw the ball, you name it. I don't think Temple will even know what's going on by the time the first time is over. So. I expect Jackson Arnold to just do whatever he wants, honestly, and really put himself up some gaudy numbers, get himself an early lead in kind of the stats for week 1.
All right. Well, there you have it. I see you picked him as a player of the week, which means I can still pick him for my player of the week later this season. What would have really angered me is if you picked you did like Dibes last year and picked Danny Stutzman as your Eagles target of the week for the Red River rivalry. It just sniped me on the whole thing. But all right, well, there you have it. Jackson Arnold, quarterback out of Oklahoma, is Ryan's pick. I'll throw my pick out there second. I went running back Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. He didn't finish the year strong last year. In the last 2 games, he had a combined under 100 yards the last 2 games of the year. Prior to that, though, he was on a 6-game 100-plus yard rushing streak where he averaged 159 yards a game. North Carolina is going to be starting a 5th-year senior transfer from Texas A&M in Max Johnson at quarterback. They're playing Minnesota, who allowed nearly 150 rushing yards per game last year. I could see this naturally being a run-heavy approach. I can also see, week 1, sometimes games get out of hand, and when that happens, you lean on the running back. So Omarion Hampton, go run for 200 yards and bring this thing home for me in week 1. He's my player of the game prediction.
I don't know if North Carolina wins that game.
Yeah, we'll see. He's going to rush for 250, so...
I'm betting on Carolina. That line's actually jumped like crazy. On Sunday, they were a 2.5-point underdog. They're now a 2-point favorite. So it's shifted 4.5 points in 3 days. Apparently, Minnesota's running back and receiver are questionable from team, and PJ Flex.
Hey, Mark, Ryan's shaking his head too, so I think something might be up with your mic. I thought maybe it was just me, but your mic got real quiet. Now it sounded normal though. Say something again.
Testing.
Yeah, you're good now. Say that one more time.
So the North Carolina line actually jumped. They were plus 2.5 on Sunday. That has moved 4.5 points. They are now favored by 2. So North Carolina, I think it's because Minnesota's top running back and top receiver are both questionable.
You're good. They're thumbs downing the comments, not your microphone.
This is bad job by me. Bad
I just want to throw this out there into existence. Me and Chris Coyle beat Ryan in the Beer Olympics.
I had bad teammates. I did my part.
All right. Well, let's keep it rolling here. Mark, while we got your mic working, tell me about your player of the week prediction.
Yeah, my player of the week prediction, I could have went a lot of ways, but I'll be locked in on Virginia Tech Vanderbilt because I like Virginia Tech minus 12.5. And I decided to correlate the pick, so I'm going with Kyron Drones, their quarterback, dual threat guy. Not exactly the most efficient passer. Like, he's not going to, remind anyone of Carson Beck necessarily. But he definitely can get it going on the ground. He had a game last year where he had 176 yards yards rushing. Don't ask me why he only had 91 yards passing in that game. But he did have 5 games over 220 yards passing. He had 2 games with over 135 yards rushing. He had multiple games with multiple rushing touchdowns, and he's going against a Vanderbilt team that was literally the 4th worst defense out of the 133 D1 schools last season. So Vanderbilt, just a terrible program, will never improve, and they basically have they transferred in a ton of New Mexico State guys. I don't think New Mexico State is going to be able to handle Virginia Tech here, and that's basically what it is. Even though they're wearing the Vanderbilt uniform, so I think Kyron Drones is going to run all over them. My only concern is that it would be a blowout, and maybe he won't put up gaudy numbers. But while it's still in question, I think he'll get 100 yards rushing.
All right, so Mark takes a quarterback, expecting him to win with rushing yards. Dibes, you took a running back. Is he going to win with passing yards? What do you got going on here in Kansas?
That is such a good play because, week 1, you're trying to pick the players you don't want to pick, later on during the season because we can't pick these guys twice. But I jumped on this because I think Kansas is super underrated. And give me Devin Neal, who is a yardage machine. He has registered back-to-back seasons of more than 1,000 yards, 6.6 yards per carry last year. That led all Big 12 rushers. He also caught 24 balls for 214 yards. He's a well-rounded running back. During his 3 years in Lawrence, rushed for over 3,000 yards and 33 scores. That ranks number 4 all time for Kansas. Number 3 in rushing touchdowns. If he produces this year, this could be the best running back in Kansas history. He just needs 700 yards and 9 touchdowns to rank number 1 in school history. So you look at last year, there's a guy who eclipsed 100 yards 6 times. And since 2022, his 2,300 rushing yards only trails Quinshon Judkins and Blake Corum among Power 5 rushers. His 25 rushing touchdowns in that span is 4th among the same group with Corum, Judkins, and Audric Estime. What's up, Mark? So you look at Devin Neal. He's an incredibly shifty running back. This guy is, I think, a better prospect than Blake Corum, who I thought was overrated. Just elite change of direction ability. His 38% forced missed tackle rate was 5th among all backs in the country last year. Kansas takes on a school named Lindenwood, which I still don't believe is real. They play on Thursday night. So if you're watching this as it drops on Thursday, make sure you watch that game. And I expect the Jayhawks to just control the clock and dominate on the ground. I expect Devin Neal to break off a couple big touchdown runs and an easy victory. Give me Devin Neal for the easy W and get Team Dibes 1-0.
So real quick, Dibes, you really buried the lead there as far as the leading rusher in Kansas Jayhawk history. But you didn't mention any of the greats that went to Kansas. With the Jayhawks. You got Gale Sayers, John Riggins. Like, these are
Wow.
great running backs, right?
Wow.
That would have been the first thing I would have said.
You're old.
I am old. I can't help it. Although I wasn't alive when Gale Sayers was running for the Kansas Jayhawks.
Lindenwood University has under an enrollment of 4,936 students.
It's like cooking.
My favorite was when I was doing the research. I was previewing of Kansas versus Lindenwood, and I turned to my wife. I'm like, "Where do you think Lindenwood is from? Like, what state would you find Lindenwood University?" She goes, "Texas."
Illinois?
It is Texas.
Oh, wow.
I was like,
"What in doubt, go Texas." Well, we were doing the same thing. We were looking up some other school, and we were like,
Wait. According to my quick Google search, it's in St. Charles, Missouri. Unless there's another Lindenwood out there.
All right. I guess, I don't know. Maybe Google's full of shit. I don't know.
Maybe. Wait. What if they've got like a satellite campus that has like 1,000 students or something too? I don't even know.
You're right. It is St. Charles, Missouri. Maybe we were talking about a different school. Maybe we'll just edit that out of the final.
Oh, maybe we were, because I think we were talking about the Texas State game, and they were playing some no name that nobody's ever heard of.
Maybe, I don't know.
I
don't know. I do too many college football.
Right. Yeah,
we may not know exactly where Lindenwood College is, but we do know the location of the two teams we're about to talk about in our Game of the Week breakdown. We're going to preview Clemson versus Georgia, number 14 versus number 1. It is our Game of the Week breakdown. Guys, let's get into it. Game of the Week breakdown. Now, guys, there is some good games that we're not breaking down this week. We kind of talked about Notre Dame and Texas A&M a little bit in our Player of the Weeks. You've got USC, LSU. There's some good football going on this weekend, but we got to zero in on one of these, and so we're zeroing in on number 14 Clemson, number 1 Georgia. This is at noon on ABC. Georgia is favored by 13.5. Ryan, talk to me about this game. What are you expecting?
Yeah, listen, I think this is going to be a little bit closer than maybe people think. Clemson, their defense, obviously Dives does not agree. And I know one reason why he hates the quarterback. But anyway, I'm actually going to the Clemson defensive side of the ball. Their secondary over the past couple of years have not been great. But it seems like they have kind of shored up that secondary. Again, their safeties are really excellent. Obviously, you have Barrett Carter in the middle there, the linebacking core. The Tigers up front are certainly young, but they are big. They have a lot of size. They have a lot of talent. They just have a little bit of inexperience there. And I think they'll match up well with Georgia's offensive line. Unfortunately, though, Georgia there's just no, obvious weakness. They can throw the ball. They can run the ball. They could pass defend. They could stuff the middle up in the run. I just think, unfortunately for Clemson, in order to win this game, is going to have to play perfect football, where Georgia will just have to be Georgia. But I do think this is going to be a one-score game, maybe 7-8 points, something like that. Personally, I would go with Clemson on that line. I think they cover it, but ultimately Georgia's going to end up winning. It's honestly, I don't know the last time a number one team lost their opening game. I don't know if that's ever happened. And if it has, shame on them. And it's not going to happen on week 1. That's
Do you know when the last time Georgia lost a regular season game is?
2021.
21, right? 2. No,
It's
21.
Is it 2019? Actually, is it 2019?
It's 2020. You were all around it. I got a 21 and 1,389 days ago when they lost to Florida on November 7th, 2020.
That's insane.
It's the last regular season game they've lost. And the only other games they've lost are 2 conference championship games to Alabama. So it's hard to pick against a team that's on a heater like that. But Mark, where are you at with this game?
By the way, the last time Georgia lost a game, Kyle Pitts was the tight end of the other team. to give you an idea of how long ago that was. He was the tight end on that Florida 2020 team. But I'm all over Georgia. Georgia minus 13 is my favorite bet of the week. And it's because I just don't think that this downward trajectory you're seeing from Clemson is a blip in the radar that they're going to bounce back from. I think this is the sign of things to come with Clemson. Dabo's refused to adjust to the new era of the transfer portal. I've got a fun fact for everybody. There are 4 teams in college football that did not take a transfer in the transfer portal.
Wow.
It is Clemson.
That's crazy.
And then the other 3 are service academies.
Oh, wow. That is so not good.
Clemson is the only team in the country who didn't take a transfer who wouldn't have needed a congressman to give them permission. So it's just, I get that they recruited a high level, and that's why Dabo feels like he doesn't have to go to the transfer portal. But guess what? They only return half their starters. So we're talking about a team that lost half their starters, and they don't transfer players in. So to me, it just feels like I remember 2022 to open the season, Georgia played Oregon. It was Dan Lanning's first year as the coach of Oregon and Bo Nix's first year in Georgia or in Oregon. And they went to play Georgia in Atlanta, and they lost 49-3. I don't think that that's out of the question on Saturday.
Can you imagine if Army had somebody transfer to Navy to play football?
Yeah, I'm more of a water guy now.
All right. To me, you talked about Clemson, and my biggest mismatch, I think, in this game is just their offensive line is overmatched. I know I previewed one of their offensive tackles, but this is a team that struggled to establish the run last year. They ranked 94th in the NCAA in tackles for loss allowed, and now they face the Georgia front 7. I just really don't think that's going to go very well. But I'm somewhere between Ryan and Mark. I've got Georgia to win. I'm not calling 49-3, but I've got Georgia in this one. Dibes, where are you at?
Yeah, this is all about the Carson Beck show. If we're talking strictly NFL draft prospects, that's where this starts and that's where this ends. You look at this guy, he's an excellent decision maker with the football. He's incredibly accurate inside the pocket. 71.7% of his throws were charted as accurate last season, according to PFF. That was the best mark in college football last year. He's got a quick release. The one thing he needs to get better at is he needs to be better outside of that pocket. He had a 38.9 passing grade per PFF when moved out of his spot last year. So it's going to be absolutely vital for Clemson to get pressure on this guy, get him out of the pocket. Luckily, the Bulldogs have just a solid amount of offensive lineman prospects, led by Tate Ratledge, who we covered last year, and returns one of the best elite in terms of pass protectors in college football. And then you look at Clemson. It's pretty much the exact opposite. I'm not a big Cade Klubnik guy. I've never been on the Cade Klubnik bandwagon. He is very much overrated. He ranked 102nd per PFF with a 63.9 passing grade. But I don't understand why people hype up this guy. He's got a lot of arm talent. He's got a lot of zip on the ball, but he's not an accurate passer. He had 19 turnover-worthy plays last year. That was the third most in the ACC. You also had 13 fumbles, which were tied for the 4th most in college football. And that does not include 8 dropped interceptions, which was tied for the 2nd most in the Power 5. So at the end of the day, this is all about the Clemson Tigers, getting consistent pressure on Carson Beck, forcing him out of the pocket. That'll be, I think, the telltale sign. I think Georgia wins this by 2 touchdowns, and it's not close.
I have a fun fact real fast, and it's actually not about this game, but Dives mentioned turnover-worthy plays, and this is the Eagles Pinpool Network, so I feel like I have to at least say the stats. I heard it today. Jalen Hurts had 15 turnover-worthy plays last year. How many of those 15 do you think were intercepted?
All of them.
15.
Yeah.
For reference, Baker Mayfield had 24 turnover-worthy plays. He had 10 picks. Generally, the rule of thumb, about 60% of your interceptions or 60% of your turnover-worthy plays turn into interceptions on an average basis. Jalen Hurts is the only quarterback in NFL history to throw 10-plus turnover-worthy plays and never get away with one in a full season, which I think means Jalen Hurts had the unluckiest year in the history of the NFL last year. That's my fun fact of the stat that I heard today.
Yeah.
Law of
Fun stuff.
averages, right? The law of averages will kind of
exactly.
make 2024 a really good season.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Armchair Scouts. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, be sure you hit that subscribe button so you get all the shows on the Eagles Pinpool Network feed. We got 6 shows a week coming your way. You can check out our crew on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. Ryan is at Philly Sports PSA. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. _. And we will catch you guys next week for another episode of the Armchair Scouts.